Ilara had always dreamed of a life beyond the dusty confines of her village. At 20, she was the eldest daughter in a family of 7, her father's pride and her mother's quiet hope. The village of Eldridge nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside, where the sun painted the fields gold each morning and the stars whispered secrets at night. But for Ilara, those fields were chains, binding her to a fate she never chose. Her father, Harlan, was a stern man, weathered by years of toil under the unrelenting sky. The family's farm had seen better days, droughts had scorched the earth, and debts piled up like storm clouds. When the wealthy merchant from the neighboring town proposed an arrangement, his son would marry Ilara's younger sister, but only if Harlan settled his debts. Harlan saw no other way. The merchant's influence extended to the local lenders, and refusal meant ruin. But the merchant's son was a brute, known for his temper and wandering eyes. Ilara couldn't bear the thought of her sister, sweet and fragile Lila, bound to such a man. In a moment of fierce protectiveness, she volunteered herself instead. "Take me," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Lila is too young." Her parents protested, but the decision was made. The merchant agreed, amused by her spirit, and the wedding was set. Ilara's groom? Not the merchant's son, but a twist of fate. The merchant demanded she marry one of his debtors, a poor farmer named Thorn, to teach her humility. Thorn was a man of the land, simple and unassuming, living on the outskirts in a modest cottage. Rumors swirled about him, widowed, young, reclusive, with a past shrouded in mystery. The wedding day arrived like a thief in the night. The ceremony was sparse, held in the village square under a gray sky that mirrored Ilara's mood. She wore a simple white dress, handed down from her mother, its fabric soft but heavy with resignation. Thorn stood tall, his broad shoulders straining against a worn shirt, his dark hair tousled by the wind. His eyes, a deep brown like fertile soil, met hers briefly, but he said little. As the vows were exchanged, Ilara felt the weight of eyes upon her, the pitying glances from villagers, the satisfied smirk of the merchant. "I do," she whispered, sealing her fate. Thorn's response was equally quiet, his voice rough like gravel. The reception was brief, a meager feast of bread, cheese, and ale. Ilara barely touched her food, her mind racing with fears of what the night would bring. Forced marriage or not, the expectations were clear. She imagined Thorn as rough and demanding, claiming his rights without care for her feelings. As dusk fell, they departed in a rickety cart pulled by an old horse. The journey to Thorn's farm was silent, the only sounds the creak of wheels and the distant call of owls. Ilara clutched her small bag of belongings, her heart pounding. The cottage came into view, a humble structure of stone and thatch, surrounded by fields that stretched into the darkness. Thorn helped her down, his touch gentle but firm. He led her inside, where a fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the walls. The room was sparse, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a bed in the corner draped with faded quilts. A single lantern hung from the ceiling, its light soft and inviting. "I'll fetch water for you to wash," Thorn said, his voice breaking the silence. He disappeared outside, returning with a basin of cool water and a cloth. Ilara nodded, retreating behind a screen to cleanse the day's dust from her skin. Her mind whirled, what would happen next? Would he demand intimacy, as was his right? When she emerged, Thorn had prepared a simple meal, stew from the pot over the fire, bread, and a cup of herbal tea. "Eat," he said, gesturing to the table. "You must be hungry." They sat across from each other, the fire popping softly. Ilara picked at her food, stealing glances at him. He was older than her by perhaps a decade, his face lined with the marks of hard work, but there was a kindness in his eyes that surprised her. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharper than intended. Thorn paused, his spoon midway to his mouth. "The merchant holds my debts. Refusal meant losing the farm. And I couldn't let a young woman like you be thrown to the wolves." Ilara frowned. "Wolves? Like the merchant's son?" He nodded. "I've heard stories. You're brave for stepping in for your sister." Brave? She felt anything but. "I had no choice." "Neither did I," he replied softly. "But perhaps we can make the best of it." The meal ended, and Ilara's anxiety peaked as Thorn cleared the table. The bed loomed in the corner, a symbol of her dread. He noticed her tension, his expression softening. "Ilara," he said, using her name for the first time. "Tonight, and every night, nothing will happen that you don't want." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "What?" He sat on the edge of the bed, gesturing for her to join him at a distance. "I know this marriage was forced. I won't force anything else. You can sleep here, I'll take the floor." He nodded, and in that shared silence, a fragile bond began to form. Evenings brought stories. Thorn had traveled in his youth, working on ships that sailed to distant lands. He spoke of bustling ports, exotic spices, and stars that guided sailors home. Ilara listened, enchanted, her own dreams of adventure stirring. One night, as rain pattered on the roof, Thorn pulled a worn book from a shelf. "Can you read?" he asked. "A little," she said. "My mother taught me basics." He handed her the book, a collection of tales from faraway places. "Practice with this. I'll help." And so, by lantern light, they read together. Thorn's voice was steady, correcting her gently, praising her progress. Ilara's world expanded, word by word. But not all was idyllic. The merchant's shadow loomed. He visited unannounced, demanding updates on the farm's output, sneering at Ilara's involvement in the fields. "A wife's place is inside," he scoffed. Thorn stood firm. "My wife works where she chooses." Ilara's heart swelled at his defense. As weeks turned to months, affection bloomed like spring flowers. Thorn's touches were accidental at first, a hand steadying her on uneven ground, fingers brushing as they passed tools. Each sent sparks through her. One evening, after a long day, they sat by the fire. Ilara reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." He squeezed it gently. "You've changed my life too, Ilara." That night, for the first time, she invited him to the bed. Not out of duty, but desire. Their union was tender, a meeting of souls as much as bodies. In his arms, Ilara found not chains, but freedom. The change that began that wedding night rippled outward. With Ilara's ideas, irrigation from a nearby stream, crop rotation learned from books, they turned the farm profitable. Debts were paid, and the merchant's hold weakened. Ilara's family visited, marveling at her happiness. Lila hugged her tightly. "You saved me, sister." But it was Thorn who saved her, showing that love could grow from the unlikeliest soil. Years later, as they watched their children play in the fields, Ilara reflected on that fateful night. What he did, offering respect instead of taking what was his, changed everything. It turned a forced marriage into a chosen life, a poor farmer into a beloved partner, and a trapped girl into a woman free.